Are going to look at the pre-colonial caravan trade, which is commonly known as long-distance trade. Long-distance trade is one of the common trades that took place in the interior of East Africa and the coast of East Africa. It was also called as the pre-colonial caravan trade. Reason, it was a trade that was majorly done by groups called the caravans, carrying goods from the interior to the coast and from the coast to the interior on either their heads or in their hands, carrying goods in their hands or on their heads. That's why we call them caravans. They used to move on foot, traveling from long distances, carrying goods, and they could move in groups between 100 to 1,000 men. But these groups could move gathering goods from different areas of different societies after goods that were gathered by African leaders or chiefs. So long distance trade got its name from the ways it was conducted. It was conducted on long distances. People used to move, or merchants used to move from the interior of East Africa to the coast of East Africa. Traders moved long distances from the interior to the coast of East Africa using moving groups. These groups were organized in 1,000 or 100 men, carrying goods on their heads or in their hands, and they could move for months or even years carrying goods, and they could take long to come from the interior or to go to the coast of East Africa. The main participants in this kind of trade or long distance trade were commonly, when you look at the African groups, included the Nyamwezi, the Akamba, the Yao, the Chaga, the Kikuyu of Kenya, Buganda, Bunyolo, and the Luo. So this trade was majorly involving many decentralized African states. So the Nyamwezi were the main participants because Nyamwezi were good when it came to moving long distances. The Akamba, the Yao, the Chaga, the Kikuyu were good when it comes to gathering goods that traders or merchants used to pick. And some of the interior interior groups like the Nyamwezi, the Akamba, they had goods like ivory, skins, slaves, gold, beeswax, salt, copper, among others. These were exchanged with those of the Europeans or the Swahili traders who came with beads, guns, millers, clothes, glasses, gunpowder, among others. So Africans rushed for those goods, whereas the foreigners rushed for the African goods. So this made Africans to shift from agriculture, and they later all turned to long distance trade. Long distance trade made many African chiefs to become rich, and many Africans started to cry because of the way people used to acquire slaves. We shall see that the slaves and the ivory were got through harsh measures. If you look at slaves, they were hunted. They were got from Ontapa Kingdom, and it was after raidings they could attack weaker states. They burned their huts, and whoever that tampered to run away from the hut, they were taken as prisoners of war, and later on they were sold as slaves to the slave masters. So this created fear, tension in East Africa, and later on it made many Africans to leave their land, which is called displacement. So long distance trade got its name from the way it was conducted. It was a trade which was involving moving of long distances. Or it is called pre-colonial caravan because it involved the caravan groups who used to carry goods from the interior to the coast, and from the coast to the interior between 100 to 1,000 men, and these men were always boarded. They used to use even loots. They not use the main channels. They used the loots like that of the southern, the central, and the northern loot, and the minor loot of Katumas, which was dominated by people from Sudan. So that is the trade that we are going to look at today, long distance trade, or the pre-caravan trade of East Africa. Look at the reasons for the development of long distance trade, reasons for the development of long distance trade. One of the reasons or the factors that led to the development of long distance trade, it was the active participation of different African groups. So different African groups like the Yao, the Nyamwezi, the Akamba, the Kikuyu, the Chaga, among others, helped this trade to develop because they helped in supplying or giving surplus goods which were used as trade commodities during the trade. So Africans were so influential when it came to supplying goods that were later on exchanged by the traders. For instance, they supplied slaves, they supplied ivory which they got through hunting, they supplied gold, they supplied copper, they supplied diamond, among other goods. So this boosted the trade, and later on it contributed to its growth in East Africa. So Africans, that's one of the ways they helped this trade to develop into the trade that all Africans reached the time and admired to join. Another one, Africans also, there was also high demand for foreign goods. Africans highly demanded, they were eager to touch, to put their hands on the foreign goods. They wanted to get beads, they wanted to get glasses or millers, they wanted to get guns and gunpowder, and more so the major good that the Africans were yearning, it was the gun and the gunpowder, because many African kings and chiefs admired to get these guns to help them in terms of expansion. So because of their heavy demand, they also ended up being demanded by the foreigners to supply them with their goods like gold, diamond, which was exchanged with the foreign goods. Africans used to give gold and they were given beads. They were used to give gold, they were given glasses in that way. So the high demand for goods by the Africans and even the Europeans boosted the trade. We have the arrival of the Portuguese at the coast in 1500 AD also forced the Arabs to abandon the Indian Ocean trade. Remember, the reasons for the collapse of the Indian Ocean trade was the coming of the Portuguese. So when the Portuguese came, it scared the Arabs. It scared the Arabs to come also, to leave Indian Ocean, to come and they involved in the trade called long distance. So this trade also boosted because of the coming of the Portuguese, which made the Arabs, which made many groups to shift their attention from Indian Ocean to long distance trade. Remember, it was Indian Ocean first, but because of its collapse, people shifted the attention to long distance. Another one, the opening of different trade routes in East Africa. The interior of East Africa, traders were able to open different channels that made the trade very cheap or easy. For instance, routes like the southern route, the eastern route, so the northern route and the central route and the Katumas. The routes, these are small channels, not the main, but routes are small channels that traders used to move. And the reason why they did not use the main routes, they were afraid of being attacked by different African groups. So, and in the process, they generated these small routes which helped them to make trade very easy. They could easily move using these routes. These routes used to pass through forests, thick areas, and they end up reaching into the market centers. Another one, the coming of Said Said. Said Said, after shifting his goods from Muscat, and he went to Zanzibar. When he reached in Zanzibar, he established a slave market there. So it made slaves that were always carried from far areas. They were later on settled into Zanzibar. So Zanzibar became a market center, a resting center for slaves, where they were later on picked. And still in Zanzibar, Said established there a clove plantation. Still, cloves were demanded in trade. So this also boosted the trade. The availability of the trade items also led to the development of long distance trade inevitable. Goods were always there, they were available, but time came and they became scarce and also led to its collapse. So goods like slaves, ivory, beeswax, among others, were always available. So when they were demanded, still they were there. We have the abolition of slave trade in the western part of Africa around 1840. Also made the trade to develop. So those are some of the factors that led to the development of long distance trade. Organization of the pre-colonial caravan trade. The organization of the pre-colonial caravan trade. Long distance trade was also called the pre-colonial caravan trade that was carried between the coastal merchants and the interior tribes in East Africa. The traders moved long distance from the interior to the east to the coast, and they used the moving groups. That is to say, between 100 to 1,000 men to and from the coast, and they could move for months or even years, carrying their goods on their heads or on their hands. The main participants in this trade included the Nyamwezi, the Akamba, the Yao, the Chaga, the Kikuyu, Baganda, Banyolo, and the Luo, who exchanged goods with the Arabs and the Swahili people at the coast. Goods from the interior included the ivory, animal skins, slaves, gold, beeswax, salt, and copper. These were exchanged with the goods from the Arab traders or the Swahili traders, who brought guns, mila, clothes, glasses, among others. Swahili people introduced the Swahili language, which was the mode of communication. So during communication, remember at the first there was a problem of language barrier, but when they intermarried the people, they introduced the Swahili language, which was made the mode of communication. And then the mode of transport was head portage. Goods were carried by the traders on their heads or in their hands. And in the system of exchange, at first it was barter, goods for goods and services for services, but later on Kawali shells were introduced, but still they were also replaced by what they call the coins, the copper coins, replaced the Kawali shells. Another point, the trade involved major trade routes, that is the southern route. This route was controlled by the Yao, and it started from the Chira, then through Malawi and the southern Tanganyika up to when it reached the Monatapa Kingdom in Congo. So the southern route started from the areas of Chira, and it went through Malawi, southern Tanganyika, up to when it entered into the Monatapa Kingdom in Congo. The central route, this route was the biggest and the busiest route, and it was controlled by the Nyamwezi. It began from Bagamoyo through Zaroma, and later on it went to Gogoland, and then Tabora to Karagwe, Koma, Buganda, Bunyolo, up to when it reached the eastern parts of Congo. So another route is the northern route. This route, the northern route, started from Pangani and Mombasa, and it passed through mountain Kenya and Tahiti Hills, and it went through, or it went up to Lake Balingo, and it was controlled by the Akamba people. Yes, the Akamba, they're the one who controlled this route. Another route, and this was the minor route. This was the route called Katumas. Katumas, it was controlled by the Sudanese. The Sudanese were the people who dominated this route, and the major goods that were exchanged around this route were slaves, ivory, and gold. And looking at these routes were used by the traders to simplify their movement, because they are afraid of losing the main roads or the main channels because of the fear of African groups to attack them and animals. However, still in the routes where they passed, still they faced oppositions from different African groups, and still some of them were eaten up by wild animals like the man-eaters, the lions. These lions punished many long-distance traders, and later on they cried for support, whereby they were given guns, and these guns were used for defense. They used to shoot those animals or groups that were trying to stop them from moving. So these are some of the routes that were used by the traders during the long distance trade, and because of these routes, the trade later on was boosted in East Africa. Many African chiefs, many African kingdoms developed depending on this trade. Slaves were taken, they were acquired from Monatapa, and they were given to them by the kings. Whoever that misbehaved in the society, the wrongdoers, were taken as slaves. Bonded men were taken, raidings were done, so on and so forth, for the kingdoms to survive in the trade. So that's how the trade was organized during the 19th century.